Hello.
Nice.
We're live.
Well.
Nice. We're live.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, there we go. Welcome. So,
hello. Hi, everyone. As promised, I'm here with Todd. We are a little late, a little technical difficulty. You know, Makeba is what? Technologically challenged, but I try. Todd, tell the people about yourself.
Makeba, thank you so much for, having me share in your group. I've been watching your group for a little bit, and I shared my story kind of on a post a while ago. And I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse, oh my God, for well over 25 years. And how I got into nursing was not by like, oh, this was something I wanted to do initially. I didn't really know much about it. I was really kind of a lost soul for a while, and went to college for a little bit, didn't do so well, and joined the military, and became a medic. So I was there and doing that, and I was like, I had this like dream, like, back in the 80s, I'm dating myself now. There was like that movie Cliffhanger, with
and I'll pretend I don't know what you're talking about.
with Stallone, and I was like, I want to do like air rescue and stuff like that. So honestly, I was like, I didn't want to go to medical school, so I said I'm gonna go to nursing school, and they'll help me pay for it. And the military did, and I went to nursing school, and it was hard. I was like, oh my God.
Imagine.
Being a nurse is hard, right? Going to nursing school is hard. I tell students that all the time. I said it's hard by design, because it's hard.
Do you think it has to be that hard?
I don't think it has to be that hard, but here's my method to my madness, right? About my philosophy around it. I tell people this all the time, like, you got to be able to deal with the stress of school and the hard things because the job is hard. It's, you know what I mean? Like, you're doing a lot of challenging things for sure.
Yeah.
And, juggling multiple things, got to know a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, people's lives in some stakes are in your hands. So, I was like, because the military kind of taught me that they like indoctrinated you into like doing really hard things. And it's like, you got to do this. And by dealing with it, it gave you the kind of fortitude to move forward in other areas. So, so that was it. And then I went out, I was able to get a job. It was in the time when there was no nursing shortage. It was actually hard to get jobs. And I worked in cardiology at a university hospital, and then went into the ICU, which was like, oh my God, I did that because I was like, what was I thinking? But I love the ICU. Like, I rather take care of 2 patients very intensely than like 10 or whatever that
right.
I couldn't see or whatever. And then throughout my career, I got burned out. Like, I have to be honest, like I was a burned out nurse. It was hard work. There was a lot going on.
Imagine that burnout,
huh? For sure. Nurses weren't so nice to each other. That was part of it. I struggled with kind of how leadership was in hospital setting, and I did a lot of different things. Like, I had a friend who, was like, he went in the corporate world. I did medical device stuff like sales and education. I've done a lot of things. I did skilled nursing, ER. I've done home care, kind of transitional care stuff. And I did relatively recently a geriatric care management role. Which is kind of interesting. It's big on the West Coast and down South. It's a pay for service. People run their own businesses doing it.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I'm a health coach, and I've done that, my own business, for the last probably 5 years. And because I just was tired of, long shifts, uh, lots of stress, and a lot of different competing things. And I just knew it. Like, I really got burned out and I didn't know what to do in nursing. The great thing about nursing is there's so many different things you could do.
Mm-hmm.
But then certain things require education. I found that people would try to get higher education to escape kind of the stress, and then they'd find themselves in another different level of
That's
stress.
what I was gonna say. I was like, let's back this up for a minute. Like, so, okay, I'm in a stressful situation, so I'm gonna go back to school so I can escape the stress.
I find I didn't do that, because when I think about school, like, my mother was a teacher. She got her master's and all that because she was a teacher, right? And I always did like a cost analysis, and I'm not a numbers guy, believe me. Like, my dad's a retired accountant, right? And I'm an embarrassment for that. But I did a cost analysis. Like, is me getting this degree with time and money going to increase my salary that much more? And honestly, it kind of didn't. And
Okay.
I thought about nurse practitioner. It just wasn't my passion. And I
Yeah.
felt like nursing were still the one thing that somebody taught me, because I have done some leadership roles, is like nurses and PT. They did this comparison because this person was a physical therapist and they were a leader in a healthcare organization. And they said nurses have a little bit more challenging time with leadership. And, I don't want to piss anyone off. They're used to taking orders. Nurses are used to taking orders. Do you have a doctor's order? Do you have this? Do you have that? And all that. So I just learned a whole bunch of different things. And I said, I resonated with that a little bit. But, I realized at an age, at a certain point, I'm like, I got to be the master of my world. If I want to, I got to engineer and create my own escape. And interesting, my life story is, I've been a nurse. I've done a lot of different things in healthcare, corporate, and all that. And my business was doing great. And a
Mhm.
friend of mine who's a nurse was like, Todd, help me with that geriatric care management role. I just need some help. I'm looking for a per diem. And I'm like, I could do per diem, because I was really working part-time, earning a full-time income. And I said, yeah, I could do it. And then she's like, Todd, my full-time person backed out. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll come on board. So I did. She said, just, help me out. And I did. And blessings, and for sure,
Right.
in a way. So I took this role, still worked my business, got kind of busy, but that was okay. And the great thing is I could do it around what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, my mom passed away unexpectedly. It's been like this
Oh,
crazy year, like unexpectedly, like died in her sleep,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was tough. Like, I was like, oh my God, but two things kind of, and I was telling somebody else who interviewed me on a podcast, two things came up for me. And this was prior to my own personal journey, which I'll share in a minute. Was I realized, working in the geriatric care management role, like, I would have clients and I would manage them at home. Like, either their family was really busy, which a lot of families are, and they couldn't, you're literally their advocate. You're taking them to appointments, you're quarterbacking a lot. And, this gentleman, I'll never forget it. He was a CFO, right? He had money. So money wasn't really a challenge, but he said to me, he goes, we got really close. I felt like we were like family after a while. He goes, Todd, he goes, I worked my whole life. And he got, he had Parkinson's and all this. And he goes, this is what I got. And
Wow.
it hit me. That hit me a bit. I was like, but it hit me, and I was just like, okay. And then my mom passed in February of, what are we in 2021 of 2020. So it's just before COVID, right?
Mm.
And she was 75, retired at 70.
Oh my goodness. Are you
Reti-
serious?
yeah, retired at 70, 75. She was a teacher, loved her job. And I was like, man, life is short.
Yeah.
And so these were things going on in my mind. We got hit with COVID, right? All of us that are watching, though, it was crazy. When it first came, it still is crazy, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're like dealing with crazy. And the weird thing about it is I never stopped working. Like there was a lot of people, they're home, they're doing this, they're working with phones. I was out in the field, and a lot of nurses were and are, and frontline, and I was just like, wow. And that gave people a taste too, like up front, that hey, if you're in healthcare, you've seen this real time. Like some of my friends, they still work in ICU, some are APRNs in ICU, and they're call me up, and it was the stories they were telling me were like, whoa, and so as I was working, so my life story, like I'm working, I take care of myself. I'm a health coach, right? Like I eat really well. I'm a healthy weight. And I like to do like mixed martial arts stuff for my passion. And I was with a client, and I had a mask on and whatever, and I lost a little bit of vision in my eye. It was like you're looking at somebody and it went blurry, their whole face. And I was like going like this. I was like, what's up with that? I'm like, maybe I didn't drink enough water. Maybe, the mask, you got this mask on, you don't know what's going on, hyperventilating, who knows, right? So I got up, I stood up, I was kind of freaked out. It lasted like 5 minutes. I get out, it kind of resolved. I call my girlfriend. I was driving the car. She goes, you should really call your doctor. I'm kind of the guy that dusts things off. I'm like, well, it's kind of freaked me out, but maybe I will. Call my doctor. And he's like, you should call your eye doctor, but maybe you should come in. And usually this is me. I dust things off until it's bad. I'm not somebody that keeps going like that, going to the doctor. And
right.
So it was kind of weird because the MA who I was talking to on the phone says, well, he's got something tomorrow. I said, all right, I'll do it. So I decided to do it. I go to see him. He did an exam. He didn't see anything. He goes, definitely. In the meantime, the eye doctor called me, their medical assistant said, oh, it's probably an ocular migraine. I never have headaches, only if I don't have enough coffee or something, So I'm like, what's that? But the doctor said you should really be seen, because if you had a stroke or something, if something happened, you should get checked out, because that was kind of, the thing. So I wound up getting checked out by him, and he's like, your vessels look good. You're good. But my primary said, if you have any more symptoms, you should go to the ER. I have a friend who's a chiropractor, and I went to go see him, and he was like, you should have went to the ER and went the eye thing. I said, all right. I was like, whatever. Like, well, it's time for the ER. And then you got COVID. Nobody wants to go step there.
So wait. What was the chiropractor's advice? Because everybody thinks they're like hokey pokey medicine. A lot of people have that opinion of them, right? What was his advice?
His advice was you should have gone to the ER.
Okay, all right.
Because he's legit, and they are legit, right? And he's
like,
I'm not doing a neck manipulation for sure, because he's like, but anyway, I went like a few days later. I live on a lake. So in the meantime, before COVID, well, actually during COVID, because I had that revelation, like my mom and that client I had, life short, I decided I'm living on a lake. So I bought a lake house. I was like, life short. I'm buying a lake house. I live on a lake now, which is pretty awesome. If you ever visit me on Facebook, you could see some of the posts on it. Whoever is watching.
In your background, I just figured, you drove someplace, got out and walked, but I didn't know you were actually in your backyard.
That's my backyard.
Oh.
And I'm like, man, I work hard. Like, life is short. Why not be like here, right?
Yeah.
So I went for a run around my lake one morning, and I came back and my hand felt a little weird. And I was just like, it wasn't anything, but it was enough I was like, it just felt like it was like I was having trouble communicating. So I told my girlfriend, I'm going to go to this small ER hospital down the street, and I thought they'd tell me, stop working so hard, you're doing too much or whatever. So I go in there, mask, the whole thing. and they do, a stroke workup. I've had friends, honestly, that are in good health, eat well or whatever, that have had strokes in their early 50s. I'm not quite 50 yet, but I was like, that kind of was always looming in my head. I was like, you just never know.
Right.
So they did the scans. Halfway through the scan, they're like, well, we got to put contrast in this. I'm like, oh boy, this can't be good. I go back to the ER bay after the scans. Nurse walks in with the ER doc and says, she goes, Todd, you're not going crazy. I go, what do you mean? She goes, you got a marble-sized tumor in your head. I was like, what? Like, it was a gut punch. I was like, and the next thing they said, I'll never forget. I don't fault them for saying it, but I probably would have said the same thing being a nurse too. Like, you don't know what to say. And they said, I'm sorry. Like, it was just this deafening, I'm sorry. And I looked, I'm like, it felt like, like, oh my God, like there's something in, and then it just changed. I was like, my girlfriend's like, you're right. I said, no, things are not good here. There's something in my head. And then you got
not good.
they're not good. She's right. I said, this is like, I was like, oh my God, what does this mean? Like, it's a proverbial, like, do I have a brain tumor? Like, all of a sudden I got a flipping brain tumor. I'm like, oh my God,
I don't know. I'm still stuck at the I'm sorry. Because I know that might be your knee-jerk reaction when you are, providing care, that might be like, oh, I'm so sorry to have to tell this man this, but I'm sorry. I don't know. I would have tried to probably fight that from coming out of my mouth, because that seems so definite. Like, exactly what it is, and this is going to take me out. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I do know what you mean. But even to this day, it's funny. I share this when somebody tells me a traumatic thing that's happening with them. Say somebody's like, I got diagnosed with cancer or something. My gut is like, oh my God, I'm so like,
right.
That's what I want to say, right? But I always say now, I share a little bit of the story. I say, I'm going to say this, but I'm going to tell you what it meant to me. But because I don't know what else to say other than like, oh my God, that's hard. I understand what hard is. Because when hard hits you,
yeah,
it's like, oh my God. And you got neurosurgeons come and see it. I don't know what this is, so the neurosurgery, this guy's like, he couldn't find any neurological issues. There really wasn't a lot of symptoms. And they basically was saying it was a incidental finding. So I'm at a small hospital and there's no way in my mind they're doing brain surgery there. They don't even have a neuro ICU. I'm like, no, they're trying to build it up. It's part of the larger health system I work for. He's like, the guy that saw me, the time they saw me, it was like late afternoon, because I was like, oh my God. And he's like, I'm going to admit you. I'm like, I'm being admitted. Like, what is like going on here, And the guy who does brains here is in the OR. He'll probably either see you later or in the morning. So to make a long story short, I'm like, admitted. And I'm like, COVID. It wasn't as strict as initial COVID, but it was, they had certain hours. So my girlfriend could come for a little bit, but I was really alone. And honest to God, the people that really impacted me the most were the transport people.
Wow.
And the PCAs, the CNAs, whatever you guys want to call them, because they had the time. They're like, oh my God. Because you look at me, I'm not on any meds. And the nurse must have had a field day at night. Oh, I got a patient. I don't have to give him anything, But the nurse was busy. She was nice. Don't get me wrong. Like,
right.
And I didn't keep saying, oh my God, I'm a nurse. Because I remember when I was working, like when you had nurse family members or nurse patients, they're like all like too much on you. You know what I mean? I was just humbled myself and I was like, yeah, I'm a nurse, but people would read my chart and they're like, come in like asking me questions, like jaw dropping. Like, you didn't have any symptoms? I'm like, no. Like, what do you think? I'm like,
I totally get it, because people want to be able to say, he must have missed this. all along he's been having this symptom and he didn't, go, you know what I mean? Because people try to find a way to connect so that, oh, this was me. Do I have any weird symptom going? It's weird how our minds start to work at work when we hear about other people's situations. It's like,
yeah. And the thing about it, like, I started to think about like this stuff, and I consider myself a good nurse, like empathetic wise, right? Like I could really be there for people in spite of the fact that we're running a million directions. But really the transport is like, how's your day? I said, it's a tough one. And they're like, really? And they just talk to me. That's all I really cared about.
yeah.
It didn't have to be about anything. They were just like, oh yeah, it's, and it was interesting. And I sat there, and it hit me. And the next day that they kept me MPO because they were going to try to do something, all this stuff. And I was like, oh man, this is just crazy. Right. So the guy comes to see me the next day. He's actually a really great guy. He brings in the scanner, like the computer thing. And I'm looking at this marble thing on my MRI. I'm like, oh my God. He goes, Todd, I don't know what it is, but I could present it to the tumor board up at the large facility. Like all of a sudden I'm on tumor boards, right? Like people don't get, like, he's like, you could do a biopsy to figure it out. I would need loaner equipment. Like, I'm like, listen,
right.
I appreciate everything, but I think I'm going to go, get a second opinion. And that it went from Thursday to Friday. I called the large institution chief of neurosurgery. They got me to see him on Monday. But the guy was really great down at the smaller hospital. He goes, you didn't really need to be admitted. Like, like probably not. But since you're here, let's run every test so you don't have to do a lot of outpatient stuff, which I was grateful for. They drew tons of labs, scanned me 6 ways to Sunday because brain, maybe it's coming from somewhere else, all this stuff. And I went that Monday to chief of neurosurgery, super nice guy. And I swear I went there with like tears, like, I wasn't like bawling, but it was just as hard. I'm like, I said it to him like 3 times. I go, Doc, this is just hard. And he's like, I know. He goes, Todd, I don't know what this is either, but it's got to come out. I'm like, oh, 0 to brain surgery. And, and I went and like, he's like, there's some swelling. They put me on steroids. I was home at my lake, but that stuff messed me up. But like, I went from I had to get my will. I talked to everybody. I just wanted to live through the surgery. Like my son, I'm like, listen, I don't know what's going to happen here. Like you're just staring down the barrel of the shotgun. Right. And I said, the things that I learned were like, I have a buddy who's he's a coach. He's an executive coach. He's a good friend of mine. And he goes, Todd, what do you think? What do you think about? And it wasn't money, right? There's nothing like 100 grand, 200 grand, or anything would have been like for me. It wasn't. I honestly was like, what am I doing here? Like, am I doing God's work? And I asked that to myself. Am I doing what I should be doing here on this planet? And I sat there and I said, yeah, because the health coaching that I did really brought a lot of purpose and meaning. And I couldn't put together the words that I was feeling. So I had my buddy, and you could scroll back on my Facebook, even it's September, it's coming up. It's my year anniversary at the end of this month, September, on Facebook. I said, help me say what I need to say. And I'm just going to post it because I couldn't get the words out, and I posted it. And people's responses were just amazing. It was like a living eulogy for me. It was like, oh, he never gave up on me. He always, all this stuff that I felt was like, wow. But the one thing came up for me was I could be doing more. Yeah. The other thing that I learned was like, nothing's that important other than living and being with people. And being
make me cry. I'm like, I'm trying not to cry. I'm like, because you're at your darkest moment and you're thinking how you can help people, what an impact you can have on people. I mean, that's just,
in reality, like, you know, I feel like it's kind of God's work. And like, that's the stuff that means stuff. Like, even as a nurse, in the midst of all the stress that we go through as a nurse, like, you know, there's license, we're always in fear of our license. We're doing too many activities. We're not enough with the patients and all that. There is this purpose you could pull out of it, right? You can, for sure. But I like the fact now that, you know, that I had this blessing of being a coach, and now I help coaches become coaches, or people become coaches, and help clients and do all that. But what really mattered was like the things you thought mattered didn't matter. Like, you know how we're working so hard for our job, or, you know, all of a sudden, like, I'm not going to work. Like my person I was working with, you know, she's like, you know, thank God. Like, God kind of worked because I had benefits, you know, not that I didn't have benefits with my business, but this was a little better. But I was just like, it doesn't matter. And like some of this drama, like my girlfriend would say something, I said, this doesn't matter. And then my girlfriend's a nurse. So she looks at me when we're going through it. She struggled with it probably a little more than I did in a certain way. And she goes, our lives have to be different. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, we're just grinding it out. And not just that we're nurses, like, I think a lot of people grind it out, right? So the interesting story about this was like, yeah, life has got to be different. Like, you know, and I was seeing that with my coaching anyway. So, but my girlfriend's a full-fledged nurse and she loves it. She does this, but she runs herself ragged, right? But she's like, wow, you know, when a health issue hits you, like, you just are like, oh my God. So I dug deeper into the health. I'm like, what am I missing here? What's going on? And there's so much confusing information, and I know a lot. And I started to put things together. I think fundamentally people don't eat correctly. I think fundamentally they think they need to exercise to lose weight. That's not true. It actually slows it down. So they never start because nobody has time, or some people do. And I always make time because I like it for different reasons. But the one thing that I figured out was like, there's a part that we're all missing, because I listen to podcasts, and and it sounds trite and everyone just blows it off, because I blew it off, was stress and mindfulness. And I started listening to some of these people, and they're like saying, our ancestors had short periods of stress when they were fighting in a war, hunting, right? Short-lived. Our time, we're not hunting. We're not doing that stuff unless it's for fun. Actually, people are doing it for fun, right? Or, you know, to hunt and they eat it or whatever. It's not this stressful thing because we got food, right? But the job, or the bad boss, or the stress work, that's the hunt for us now. And it's this long, prolonged period. It's not short gaps. So even when you go home and you take your work home in your head, you're creating this stress, which there's a lot more research on this mind, body, gut connection that's causing this. And I'm like, I got to look at this. I got to look at it. And I did. And the interesting thing was, so I go through brain surgery, right? Shocking. The great guy, he goes through the day of the surgery, like now with COVID, nobody could go in. So literally dropped me off. I woke up in the morning, honestly. I woke up at 0300. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I honestly had a flashback to where I was like going to boot camp, because I left that early, right? And I said to myself, what's harder, boot camp or this? And you know what I said to myself? I said, boot camp. And you want to know the reason why? The surgery I'll be asleep for. Boot camp, I had to like do stuff.
Yeah.
So that that is kind of the, so I went there and they're like, oh, be here at 6:30. I'm like, great, I have an early case. I gave everything to my girlfriend, phone, I had nothing. They throw a paper Johnny on, throw an IV on. I'm NPO, I'm focused on my bowels. All of a sudden, remember as a nurse, like, why is everyone focused on their bowels? But I felt all messed up from the steroids. I'm like, they must have thought I was a lunatic. But anyway, I'm sitting there. They have to do this super tiger scan on my brain mapping before the case. So I did that. And they're like, oh, your case doesn't start until 11. So I'm staring at the wall for like 4 hours. Nothing to eat, no phone. We're all addicted to our phones, nothing to read. I'm watching people go in and out. And I'm like, I'm going to have brain surgery. And I just sat there and just breathed. And, whoever would talk to me, I would talk to. And the surgeon comes out and he goes, Tom, I'm glad you decided to get this done. I'm like, well, did I have any choice?
I know.
Takes me into the OR and they do the huddle while I'm awake in the OR. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm not looking over there. Cause I used to spend a lot of time in the OR because I was a CTICU nurse. So I used to go into some cases for the heart stuff, and I'm like, oh. And the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was hungry in the PACU, which I was shocked. They did an open craniotomy.
Wow.
I thought I was going to be in the ICU. He goes, you may be in the ICU, whatever. And I'm like, oh, as long as I don't get COVID with the brain hole and the whole thing. And I was
right here.
And like you see on Facebook, my girlfriend took a picture of me of like eating, and I was like, oh my God. And my experience was like, oh my God. And then here we go, the nurse in you're like, I'm kind of being mellow. I don't want to be that. So I thought I was going to stay in the PACU all night, which would have made me happy, but they sent me to a step down unit and I was foggy from drugs and foggy from the steroids. Steroids were worse. And I looked at they put a Foley in me. I'm so pissed off. So a nurse practitioner comes in. She was funny. I go, listen, do I need this catheter? And they're like, no. I said, let's get this out. And then a nurse, God, she could have been my daughter. You know what I mean? Like she had to be in her 20s.
Like 2.
Yeah. She's like, I'm going to give you sub-Q heparin. I said, listen, I just had a brain surgery. I don't want any heparin. If it bleeds, I said, get that nurse practitioner. So I had her come in. I'm just checking with you. She's coming at me with heparin. And she goes, no, it's part of the protocol. I'm like, all right. I wasn't a jerk, honestly. And I knew she was busy. They're running around. Like, I know the gig, the aides were there more to kind of help, which honestly, they're the real kind of nurses to people from the emotional caretaking, all the stuff that originally
that we were originally supposed to be doing as nurses, we can't do.
and so it's funny. I share that story. I said, we're protecting our license. We're all about medications, interventions, and trying to do all this stuff. We don't really have the time to really get to know the patients and to do this stuff. That's why I liked ICU, because I felt like I was doing it. But I was telling some nursing school students, and I was talking to somebody about it, and she goes, yeah, I'd like to do it, but you don't make enough money. That's the handcuff, right? Like, you would love to do the CNA work with the patients, but you're not making the RN money, you know what I mean? So I was discharged the day after an open craniotomy. People were shocked. I was like, yeah, I was in good shape.
He's like, yeah.
They still, here's the other caveat. He goes, Todd, the surgeon's amazing guy. I loved him. Amazing. He goes, Todd, we got 99% of it out. We're still not sure what it is. Because usually there was section right there. He goes, we're not clear. So then I'm like, oh, geez. I had to wait a whole nother 2 weeks. My girlfriend was worried. I had 2 ways I dealt with this. I said, let me live through the surgery, knowing my name, moving my extremities, and then I'll deal with whatever I got to deal with. I got through that, and then I started to think about what it was. And
that was great.
And that's kind of how I did it. And then I really, I waited 2 weeks later. We went to the second week post-op meeting, and the PA's like, did we tell you what it was? I'm like, no. And he's like, well, it's not the best tumor, but it's not the worst. It's a benign grade 2 astropolycytoma. No, it's a polycystic astrocytoma. So I was like, okay, if the word polycystic wasn't in front of it, astrocytoma is not good. And and it was like, all right, I was like, that's a little better. Then I saw the surgeon the next 2 weeks. That's kind of how they did it. He's an amazing guy. He sat with me and he's like, Todd, you are a lucky SOB. He goes, I saw a tumor just like yours in somebody a little bit younger than you, and his was cancer. And I was, because he never gave me a committal answer. Because I asked him, I go, what are you thinking? He goes, honestly, I thought, but you're really lucky. It's a very rare tumor. I'm followed by neuro-oncology, and he's about as serious as cancer. Like, he's a great guy. But every time I see him, I go, dude, I get very nervous. He goes, I've studied your tumor extensively. And he may do research. He goes, do I have permission? Because they're very rare. He goes, in this area, I live in Connecticut, I've seen more. He goes, we rarely saw him. And he was down at MD Anderson, which I was like, wow, that's interesting. I don't have a family history of this stuff. And you'll live from scan to scan, because you go like, oh my God, is it growing? Even the treatment, they don't know. Like, it's not cancer, but if it grows, what do? They chemo or radiate or surgery again,
Yeah.
So you're always kind of looking for a while. I think the biggest thing that was really interesting, and this is what is very fascinating to me, was I all of a sudden had a nurse navigator. I'm like, oh my God, I'm healthy. What do I have this for? And they're like, that, you could take advantage of this service, and this service. And I was kind of dealing with stuff. And so they offer a clinical psychologist. And I said, oh, let me talk to that person, because they may know how you're dealing with facing death. Right. So this young girl, it was great. They did a Zoom meeting and we just chatted. And I told her some of the experience I was telling her here. And she goes, remember when I said, our lives got to change? She goes, if your life doesn't change, you're going to get mad. And I said, I could believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting story is I'm better. I have no residual, very little, nothing. And things are progressing pretty well. I'm very blessed, but it's easy to go back to the busy. And I watch it and I'm like, oh my God. And my girlfriend's back to doing the same thing. I said, what? And it made me think about this deeper. It's like, this is habitual. Like, I'm living in trauma mode or stress mode. And I think a lot of us do.
Yep.
We're living in survival mode.
Yes.
And it's crazy. And you can't, and I had another friend, he's not a nurse, and he's like, Todd, I'm trying to learn how to slow down. I go, how's that going for you? He's like, not so well. But I've learned real time that you got to be mindful of it. Right. And when things are good, you're fine. But when you're gasping for breath or you're not having whatever, then you're worried about it, but you never know. And then I said, listen, I don't know what if you talk to me 6 months, 7 months ago, I'd say, I don't know what next year is going to bring. Because when I first went for some scans, there were some little things, but it was post-operative shifting and all this stuff. So now things are on a better plane. But I was like, I could be dead in 5 years. I don't know, but I think about that.
Anybody can, but you're right.
Yeah, anybody can. Like, you can get hit by a bus when you walk out your house.
Right.
COVID brought it to our doorstep, right?
I'm not laughing. I'm just thinking about what you said about hit by a bus. My mom used to always say, don't, like, you be really happy and excited. And I lived in New York City, so she'd be like, don't go out there and get hit by a bus. You know what I mean? And that's so true, because
get hit by a bus.
It's lurking everywhere for everybody,
Yeah. And now I'm mindful of it. Like, I think about this stuff, and there's a trauma I went through with that, but I realized that, throughout my life, my earlier part of my life, there's a lot of trauma for sure. And that could very well lead to health issues. They talk more about it. And being a nurse is traumatic, and we don't even realize it. Like, I've got friends that have been working in the ICU during COVID. they've got like battlefield trauma. Like I know this, I study like the military stuff. I'm into the like Navy SEAL podcasts and people that have been to combat, and because it's very fascinating. There's some real leaderships that I listen to, and it's battlefield stress and we don't realize it, and it's happening, and there's trauma and there's symptoms. And
well, people try to minimize it, what we experience in nursing, but you really can't. It just totally relates to what you're talking about. I was sitting waiting to get some tests done. Two vets, one vet was there, another vet walks in. One was Vietnam, and I forgot what war the other guy served in, but they're maybe like 2-3 years apart, So anyway, one went to Vietnam and the other one didn't. The other one was Navy. I think when he went into the service, Vietnam was just ending. So long story short, they're sitting there, I'm here, and they're talking about these war stories. And the guy that was in Vietnam said, what I seen, what I experienced has stayed with me my entire life. And he was like, I hope no one ever has to experience that. And then they start talking about where they were when this happened and this and that. And then I said to myself, as I sat there and listened to these gentlemen, I said, I wonder if that's what nurses are going to be like when we're at the tail end of this pandemic. Are we going to be, well, when did you became a nurse during this time? Or did you work in this? Did you experience that? And you can see the emotion, like they don't even, as they're talking, you can see the emotion conjuring up in them, the sadness, the stress. It's with them.
Oh, 100%. They're seeing people die, like that are not like ready, like it's so random. Like, you hear all these stories, but I started to think about my own experience because I wasn't working in the ICU when COVID happened. Thank God on that. But even throughout my career, I'm like, as nurses, we're like eating donuts, like standing outside the door of like, oh, so-and-so's chest, like we don't think, like you become so numb to it. But you talk to somebody that's not a nurse or not in healthcare, like, oh, I've seen people die before. They're like, what? But we just get numb to that kind of stuff, and that was the thing too, like when you're on the receiving side of this, because we detach from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. So it's an interesting journey, but it's like, I feel there's PTSD involved, there's trauma, there's all the stuff, there's stress, all the stuff that I talked about, but there's a way not to be a victim about it. Like, you talk about it, you get some help, but you start to take some action. And I started to think about this deeper, there's always about this nurse bullying, or even through my ranks, my years in nursing, nurses were not nice to each other, right?
Right.
Part of me feels like that's part of the trauma, because we get angry and irritable. And, when you're under stress, I learned that in boot camp too. When I was under stress, you start to get edgy with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that you're the perfect person to give us some tips on how to deal with some of the stress. I myself, I have been, they attempted to bully me. I don't bully well, but, and that inside, when you go in there, you always wonder if today is the day I'm going to be challenged again. Are they going to do things to put my license in jeopardy? So what are 3 things that you can tell people in healthcare and outside of healthcare that might be listening to this that they can implement to kind of minimize their stress?
I think the biggest thing that people need to do is start to take physical control of their health, right? And like not complicating it, keep it very simple, starting with diet. The one thing that I've learned, and my brain was sensitive to it, I realized it before a brain tumor, even more so after. We are inflamed in our body, right? We're inflamed based on the foods that we eat and the things that we do and the constant stress. So creating something where you're not going to get inflamed and reduce that, because it crosses your blood-brain barrier, and it leads depression, anxiety, and stress are more amplified. Not to say that people don't have emotional stuff going on, but you'll be amazed that by just getting that under control a little bit, making a simple step, reach out to me, reach out to somebody you trust, whatever, start to do simple things. Don't create this big, like, I don't have time, because you're going to come up with excuses, and stop creating excuses.
So number one,
Physical.
try to eat
Yep.
food.
Yep. Food.
Okay. That's number one. So what's our number two?
Number two is try to get some movement. Nurses are pretty good with that, but some consistent movement, because it reduces the stress level. Not to lose weight, because that's not the way, but you got to do that. And I know the third one is really mindfulness, and it's hard for people. A little bit of time to slow the brain down. And you could, even if you want to do an activity, some people need like yoga. Like yoga is powerful because it's moving meditation, but to start to control the brain, it's 100% mindset. Stop telling yourself excuses, which are lies, and do something about it.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, it's not that important. The important thing is your relationship with whoever you believe in and the people around you. You'll live, because you start to believe that you need to survive, even though nothing's happening around you that you're.
Okay. So you told us straight. And they seem like really simple things. Food. If you need help with that, you can reach out to Todd. Ask him for some advice. Something easy that you can start to implement. I'm sure he'd be more than willing to help you. And then getting active, walking, right? A few minutes, however, 15, 20 minutes, whatever you can spare. And then mindfulness. And that's something I'm sure that you can also reach out to Todd with too. If you need some apps to help you kind of calm down, maybe he can give you some mantras to say, things to kind of keep you in tune. But we really need to start healing, and no one's going to do it for us. Every facility, they say that they understand. We know what's going on. We're here for you. But even if they put together like these little rest spots and this, you still have to take the time out and do it. Some of the facilities have started come up with like little breakout times and things like that. But you still have to say to yourself, this is not crap. Because nurses, people are like, oh, this is crap. I have so much work to do, da da da. You have to make time for yourself, and not just healthcare workers, people in general. We're all running on fumes.
Yeah. And tell yourself this, and this is what I had to do, as I said to myself, it's only a job.
Boom.
It's only a job.
Yeah.
It's not you or me. And we have this trap in our mind, like, oh my God.
Reflection of me.
Mm-hmm. It's just a job. They'll replace you tomorrow.
Yes.
And you are important, and start to dream again. We've lost our ability to dream about what's important to us.
Well, Todd, thank you so much for tonight. And guys, look forward to Todd's going to be posting things in the group, little things that you can use, probably encouraging you to drink water, really make time out for the walks and things like that. And even things that you can use to make sure that you're staying on track. So he's a great resource in general, so you definitely want to link up with him, send him a friend request. I like Todd. Todd is approved. Todd, you want to say anything before we say goodnight?
No, thank you so much for doing this. I hope, this was a value to your group, and I love being part of your group. And I love that you reached out to me when this was going on, when I posted early on, you're like, can you share this to the group? Yeah. It meant a lot to me. So thank you, Makeba.
Todd, big hugs. You made me cry.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.